Hi guys, welcome to this week's Reclassified here on Ickonic.com. Today I want to speak about the secret name for God, according to some, in the Freemasons. This is highly kind of controversial even within their own faction of making it up. This is just above the blue levels and the blue degrees, and this is something called the Royal Arc or Royal Arch degree. So we're going to have a look at this composite name and what it means, and they're arguing over over exactly what it means. This comes from a book called The Brotherhood, which was a fantastic book I've just read about the Freemasons. Unfortunately, I think it kind of like draws you in to the information about the legal system and how it's infiltrated the police, the legal system, and basically all walks of life, Freemasonry, and how much of a hold it has over these varying aspects. And obviously, we see the Templars, which is the Christian fact of the Freemasons, still there. It's not connected to the original Knights Templars, but does it really need to be genetically? They can just take on the same isms and the same kind of outcomes, what they want. So we see that in Temple Bar and the temple that's still there, the Freemasonic Temple, the Knights Temple, the Round Temple that's still in London at the moment. So this is all connected, and it shouldn't really work, but that's when you kind of go on the information that you think that they're worshipping certain people, but it possibly turns out that their interpretations of what these gods are is slightly different or completely different to what those down the lower ranks understand it to be. And then this book, The Brotherhood, goes on to try and blame it all on the Russians. So there you go. Worth getting, but it leads you down a different way of thinking. So this is Jarbelon. Let's have a look at what this word means. So it appears to be that when you finish the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, the Blue Lodge degrees with that teal blue colour that we've connected to Shekinah there, that protective colour, so that'll always be on the top. That's why you had that blue tealy colour, and then it goes to gold as you go up because the blue protects the truth of the gold degrees. So the Supreme Grand Royal Arch, it seems to be a degree that they've kind of snuck in there along the way, and it's a kind of a controversial degree even within its own system. And Freemasonry is so wide and varied that to put it all in one basket is to do it an injustice, especially the people involved further down that have no idea what some of this stuff means. So when you get to that degree, which in some ways is the 4th degree, but other components of Freemasonry see it as an extension of the 3rd degree, you come to their secret word for God, apparently, although they've changed this. So it seems to be a composite, according to Stephen Knight, who wrote the Brotherhood book. This is what he claims it is. Jarbulon. I don't think you're supposed to say that if you're in the Freemasons, but Jarbulon. It's Jahbulon. And he claims, Stephen Knight, in his book, it's a compound of the names of 3 gods worshipped in the ancient Middle East. Now, there's controversy over whether this is true or not, but Jah is Yahweh, so equals Yahweh, not Jehovah, because that doesn't even work anyway. So Yah, or Jah, Jah, equals Yahweh, the jealous god, one of a pantheon of Elohim gods. And the second part of it is Bul, B-U-L, so Baal, B-A-L-L. There's arguments of whether this is the controversial bit, whether that is true or not. And On would be your Ra, sun, god, light, turn the light on. Now there's different explanations of what this means. So Jarbulon, Yahweh, Baal, and On, 3 ancient Middle Eastern gods worshipped there, apparently. So let's have a look at Baal. Again, I'm just giving you the information. You decide whether this actually means that or not. I mean, it's really hard for us to tell people that are not in these secret societies, let alone the people inside, as it changes through the times. So the degrees tell you one thing and they'll tell you a different thing as it goes up. So Baal. Baal was a title and an honorific meaning owner or lord. So like Christ, Baal wasn't a particular being as such by the looks of it. It seems to be like a title given to many gods, back then. So it means owner or lord in the northwest Semitic languages spoken in the Levant during antiquity. From its use among people, it came to be applied to gods. Scholars previously associated the synonym with solar cults and with a variety of unrelated patrian deities, but inscriptions have shown that the name Baal, Baal, was particularly associated with the storm and fertility god Hadad and his local manifestations. So a lot of people do subscribe the name Baal, which was a title, but actually subscribe it to a fertility weather god. And that seems to be the middle bit. This is the controversial bit. A lot of people bring up and get confused between Moloch and Baal, and there seems to be a bit of an overlap of whether they were the actual same being. But Baal, if it's a title, could be Baal Moloch. Who knows? It's a title, like Mr. Moloch. So this is the generic, like En, like N in Sumerian, the Akkadian Belu, which is Baal, and Northwest Semitic Baal, as well as its feminine form, Bala. So each of these come in a male and feminine principle. These gods were androgynous. Was used as a title of various deities in the Mesopotamian and Semitic pantheons. Again, it's a title. Only a definitive article, genitive or epithet, or context could establish which particular god was meant. So you would have Baal Elyon. You could have Baal Moloch. And that's confused me for a long time. So now we know, by the looks of it, Baal is a title as opposed to a specific god. So you could have Baal Moloch. Baal, again, is well attested in surviving inscriptions and was popular in theophoric names throughout the Levant, but he is usually mentioned along with other gods, his own field of action being seldom defined because it's a title. Nevertheless, Ugaritic records show him as a weather god with particular power over lightning, wind, rain and fertility. The dry summers of the area were explained as Baal's time in the underworld. So he's gone into the underworld, into the land of Nod with Cain. And his return in autumn was said to cause the storms that revived the land. Again, this is all weather, pagan rituals, these gods that they bring on, and they are hidden behind, by the looks of it. A lot of the Abrahamic faiths are hiding these principles within it. It's quite clear that that's the truth. Thus, the worship of Baal in Canaan, where he eventually supplanted El as the leader of the gods and patron of kingship, was connected to the region's dependence on rainfall for its agriculture, unlike Egypt and Mesopotamia, which focused on irrigation from their major rivers. Anxiety about water availability for crops and trees increased the importance of his cult, which focused attention on his role as a rain god. So what we've got there is a title being kind of just given to one specific being, but it seems to be a title. So when you go back to what we were talking about at the start, Yah-Balon, Yahweh being the first one, Baal could be any one of a pantheon of gods because it's a title, like Christ. So when they're arguing saying this Baal doesn't mean one god or another, what it actually means, how do they know? Because this god Baal, this name Baal, is a title. So what they mean by Baal, probably only the higher ups really know, well above this royal arch level. So it's controversial anyway, because it's supposed to be. They're supposed to be, and we spoke about this last week, it's supposed to be confusing. It's order out of chaos. They create the chaos first on your way up to creating some sort of order, and possibly the top very small percentage of these Kabbalistic Freemasons know what's going on and what these things are supposed to mean. We can only speculate. He was also called upon during battle, showing that he was thought to intervene actively in the world of man, unlike the more aloof El. So they used to take on the powers of these deities. So that's why they would, like, if you were conquered, you would actually take on the gods of the conquering tribe that came in, because their gods were more powerful than yours, so you would take them on. The Lebanese city of Baalbek was named after Baal. Alternatively, Baal is a divine co-region within with El, where El was the executive while Baal was the sustainer of the cosmos. Again, it gets very convoluted depending where you come from. So who knows what they mean by Baal? And this is the important thing that we're trying to figure out. What does this cult mean when they talk about these things? Not what various histories talk about, because you're never going to get anywhere that way. It's what this Kabbalistic cult mean. So Jabulon seems to be the name that they're using in this Royal Arch level. So obviously we have Balmoral. We've talked about this before. This is the Scottish home of the, not really, British royals. And that's named clearly after the morals of Baal. But again, what Baal do they mean? Do they mean Moloch? Was it a title? Sir Moloch, Mr. Moloch, Baal Moloch. I would say that's probably quite close, Baal Moloch to Balmoral. Who knows what deity they meant by that. But what is really telling with this crest of Balmoral is the sigil of Saturn clearly in the middle, which matches up with the Freemasonic square and compass. That's clear as day as what that does. That goes into the cube of Saturn. So were they talking about Saturn, the Balmoral, the Lord Saturn, the Lord of the Rings? It really depends on what they mean by it, and that's what we're trying to decipher. And you can only do that by putting together the pieces of what they talk about, not what other people and other parts of the world talk about these things meaning. It's what they use it for and weaponize it for. You can see here, these are just variants of the same thing. Philema, do what thou wilt. This is the square and compass. Freemasonry, square and compass. Satanism, it's the sigil of Saturn, which again is on the Balmoral crest right through the middle there, quite clear as day is what that is. So they use elements of this, and even if you look on, there's a really good image actually during the week that I found, which was the side of the square and compass, and you can clearly see that is the X logo. So when we've said you put two together and you get the sigil of Saturn, that is pretty much spot on. But even within that, you've got one side thicker than the other on the X logo, and that's quite clearly, if you put the Freemasonry compass and square, or square and compass next to it, is clearly what the X logo is. There's no getting around that. Luciferianism, there you go, it's all encompassed in that as well. It's the seal of Satan, Saturn. It all comes back, and my kind of whole take on this is that we're talking about the same beings. It's an energetic thing. It's what your focus goes on. Now, there could be arguments made as if you don't think it's that being, then could it become something else? And I think that's a standard argument. It's a fair argument. Again, it's what these lunatics believe. So this is the Supreme Grand Royal Arch chapter of New Zealand. Now, they argue that Stephen Knight was wrong, and that's not what Jabulon actually means. So let's have a look at this, because I think it's fair to put their side across as well. The threefold word of the Royal Arch degree has a very interesting history, and has at times caused the Royal Arch, and with it, Royal Arch Masons, no end of grief. Whoa. Today, the word is given to a newly exalted companion in three parts without explanation of its derivation, to where it comes from. Merely, it's stated that this is a word which is the grand word of the Ra degree, again, so Royal Arch degree, but that could be seen as Ra, the sun god of Egypt. I would say there's a connection there, which is in its true partate form, the true and long-lost method of pronouncing the sacred word inscribed on the circle. For it is of too ineffable a nature to be fully comprehended by human wisdom. I don't know how you teach it then if no humans can comprehend it, or clearly pronounced by the tongue of any individual. Well, I just did it. However, it was not always so. The word Jabulon was previously referred to in one of the additional Royal Arch lectures as a compound word in 4 languages. Now, this doesn't make sense because it doesn't appear to me that this is true, but I'll read it anyway. Chaldee, Hebrew, Syriac, and Egyptian. Jah being the Chaldean name for God. Is it, though? Also, the Rastafarian name. It does appear to be that. So, Stephen Knight said that the Jah was actually Yah and represented Yahweh, but these guys are arguing that. So Yah being the Chaldean name for God, also the Rastafarian name, is also the Hebrew expression for the I am, but being the Syriac word denoting Lord, and On the Egyptian word signifying Father of all. So they just say that this is 3 different versions of the word God in one. God, God, God. Jabulon. And not 3 different deities mixed together in a kind of like hybrid form. And we'll see. I don't tend to believe that and agree with that, but that's the Royal Arch of New Zealand's explanation of why Stephen Knight is actually wrong in his book The Brotherhood. Then we come to this controversial part. It is the middle part of Baal that created all the fuss. Stephen Knight in The Brotherhood holds that Baal is the devil or fertility god of the Canaanites. Well, it actually is a title, but it went on to become a specific god. So it really depends on what they believe it to be in this Freemasonic chapter. However, had he done his homework, he would have found that Baal is as far from being the devil as possible. The translation from the Hebrew rendered as Lord or Master, generally an early tribal god, one of the many of which Yahweh was another. So there you go. I agree with that. It's a title, but it really depends. It doesn't get rid of the fact that it could have been Yahweh, and it's certainly not the Christian God, is it? So it's still open to interpretation of what that version of Baal was, and you cannot say that this is not representative of the devil, because you don't know. They're not telling you that. They're just saying that it's a title, which is true, but it is a title for ones that you would interpret, like Moloch, as something that you shouldn't be looking at if you're within these circles. It is this misinformation that is often trotted out by those of anti-Masonic nature to prove that we are devil worshippers. I quote, "For Masonry to employ the name of the Almighty God in such a blasphemous manner is an abomination before heaven. Such a practice breaks the third commandment, which states, 'Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain.' And how can any Christian accept the adoration of a false god in the lodge? A fitting example of never letting the facts get in the way of a good old anti-Masonic story." Well, that's not completely true, because you're not telling us which Baal that relates to. You're not clearing up anything, so there's no clarity in what they're saying there. They're just saying, no, it's not that one, not Moloch Baal, not a bad Baal, it's a good Baal. And it's not the Baal that you all think it is, because that later became an individual god, but before that it was a title. So again, this gets all convoluted, and then there's nothing from these guys from the Royal Arch Grand Chapter that's cleared up any of this at all. It's just saying it's not true. Make of that what you will. That's up to you. Now, this was really interesting. A completion of the craft degrees. I'm not going to read it all because it's very long-winded, but basically there was 2 different craft degrees that were put together or created, and they didn't agree on much of this stuff of the creation of the Royal Arch degree and this name. So there was another, later to prove most important, bone of contention between the Antians and the Moderns. So these were these 2 different types of Freemasonry, the Antians and the Moderns. Basically, you can see that as the conservative and liberals. Basically, it's the same thing. The position of a Masonic degree and associated work termed the Holy Royal Arch. This time, it was the Moderns who objected to something new. Some of the ancients had instituted this 4th degree, one of the first mentioned of which was in 1746, when a prominent Irish Antiant was exalted to it. The Moderns claimed that this was a departure from unaltered tradition, because the old craft, like other guild crafts, had known only a hierarchy of 3 degrees. So this was, again, way they got round this was to agree that it could go ahead, and one faction said it was an extension of the 3rd degree, and it was the Antians who said it was an actual 4th degree in of itself. So this Royal Arch. So this is where within this Royal Arch or Royal Arch degree, this is where this Yahabalon comes from. So this is the whole controversy over it, and then it goes on to be, the next controversy is what that actually God name means. God's lost name found. There's found it in the carpet. It was down the back of the sofa. It is important here to understand the serious occult practitioners have always had a fascination with the lost name of God. In Aleister Crowley's infamous book Magic, with a K, we read on page 200, such a word was indeed the lost tetragrammaton. It is said that an At the utterance of this name, the universe crashes into dissolution. Well, sorry about that. I just said that about... Well, we're still here, aren't we? Let the magician eagerly seek the lost word, for its pronunciation is synonymous with the accomplishments of the great work, which again is Freemasonry. The Master Therion has received this word. It is communication by him to the proper postulants at the proper time and place in the proper circumstances. According to the myth mimed in the Holy Royal Arch, a crypt is found in the foundations of the ruined temple, Solomon's temple, in which is discovered the omnific word, the lost name of God. So this is possibly one of the things that the Knights Templar say they found, this lost word of God. Remember, they went to there, they ransacked underneath the temple, they came back with things and information and knowledge, and very much in line with the Kabbalah. And one of those things they may have found, it looks to me, makes sense to have been this lost word. The name is Jabulon, which Freemasonry declares to mean I am and shall be Lord in heaven on high, the powerful and Father of all. So that's what they say it's called. They say that Jabulon means, this is the Freemasonry, the Royal Arch Freemasonry, say it means I am and shall be Lord in heaven on high, the powerful, the Father of all. That's what they say Jabulon means, whereas Stephen Knight would say it's Yahweh, Baal, and On. Depends what you believe, isn't it? The name is regarded as being so sacred that no Royal Arch Mason may say it out loud by himself, but must have two other Royal Arch Masons present, with each one saying one part of this Trinity. So you got the Trinity in there, so they all have to say it. So one says Yah, one says Baal, and one says On. You can't say it all in one go. I mean, this is the stuff that they do, and there's so many arguments about what that actually means. So these are the sort of things that this new fourth degree, or possibly an extension of the third degree, the Holy Royal Arch, get up to under the name of Jabulon. Hoodwink is placed over the candidate's eyes. He's blindfolded. The ceremony enacted out centres around a hidden vault that is found during rebuilding of Solomon's temple. Again, so you have these Knights Templar going underneath the temple and finding stuff. They're just recreating and reenacting all of this stuff. The candidate is lowered down into this vault and told to remove the cornerstone to allow more light into the vault. A mason acting as a Zerubbabel calls out to the candidate, "Rise, wrench forth the keystone and prepare to receive the light of the holy word." So remember, they're reenacting what these Knights Templar, I believe, were supposed to have done when they got to the temple. The lecture includes the explanation the secrets of the Royal Arch were only regained by wrenching forth the keystone thereof. The secret regained is the sacred and mysterious name of the true and living God Most High, Jabulon. This rediscovered name for God is revealed as Jabulon. It is regarded by Royal Arch Masons as too holy to be uttered by one person, therefore it needs three Masons to utter one symbol each. That's the Trinity. That's a nod to the Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost there. Masonic writers agree that this is a composite of three gods, Yah for Yahweh, Bul for Baal, and On for Osiris. Now, that says that they agree that. They don't all agree that at all. Stephen Knight was saying that. These Royal Arch degrees, some of them say that doesn't mean that at all. Degree curse invoked includes suffering loss of life by having my head struck off. Lovely place to hang out the weekend. Sometimes suffering loss of life by having the top half of my head struck off. Wonderful. Candidate is clothed in robes of innocence, whatever that means. Degree jewel is pinned onto chest, plus a badge and ribbon, a sacred emblem. Remember, Russell Brand and his emblems he was flogging, his Shekinah protection from the evil eye. It's all involved, I would believe. Mark known as the mysterious triple tau is placed on the forehead as a mark of salvation, which is the mark of possibly Cain. It's maybe a nod to that. That looks like basically three crosses, or one creates a T at the top. Sacred password is Amai Ruhama. Candidate is presented with the working tools of the degree: a sword, trowel, pickaxe, crowbar, and shovel. Sounds like he's going to just do over a bank. The ritual oath is sealed by kissing the VSL, whatever that is, a Bible or other sacred book. So whichever one that they subscribe to, 4 times through a square and compass and sealed with the words "so mote it be," which means used only in Freemasonry and witchcraft. No, sorry, that's just used only in Freemasonry witchcraft. So this is what they go through. They reenact this finding of this sacred name, Jahabalon, underneath the temple. And this all bleeds into literally into the Knights Templar. And then you would have thought the Knights Templar couldn't be part of this because aren't they supposed to be Catholic? So would they not be worshipping a false idol? And this is where you start to question as well, are they? Or does the God that they proclaim to be worshipping not represent what it appears to worship to them? This is where it gets all convoluted. So it's a very convoluted, confusing mess on purpose. So here you have a seal, Jarbelon. You can see it in the middle there. And this is what's represented and presented to the individuals as they go through this Royal Arch degree by the looks of it. Now, again, I don't know this for sure because obviously I'm not part of this thing, but I'm trying to decipher what's going on here. And I don't believe what they're telling the new initiates is exactly what they're doing. And it seems to be like at one level they're all worshipping different gods, but perhaps they're not. And they get told in the end that they're all, no matter what sacred text you take in, you're actually worshipping the same being. I would bet a tenner on it. This is Jarbelon. Now, he's a lovely looking figure, isn't it? I say a he, I have no idea. It's a cat head, a guy that looks a bit like Kronos, and a frog. They had this frog god a few weeks ago, and that could be pertaining to that. I would say that that's exactly what this god is. Their frog god of Elon Musk is this Freemasonic frog head. And then you've got a cat, you've got Kronos, you've got a blue eye of Shekinah on the top there, and you've got what appears to be spider's legs on top of the Freemasonic chessboard with a couple of guys in cars. Now, this obviously isn't a classic version of it. This is an updated version, but you will find that when you look for it, there are other versions of this same deity, and it just looks exactly the same. So the real important parts there are the cat head, the Kronos-looking fella in the middle, the frog head, and the spider's body. Lovely looking fella. The Knights Templar, also known as the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of Temple of Solomon. Now, this is really important because you would think if they are worshipping the Jarbelon, which is possibly Yahweh Baal, which was a title, maybe a title for monarch, maybe Baal monarch, we don't know what Baal they mean, or they may just mean the Baal that later became just Baal, but first it was a title, and On, which is Osiris, I would say Ra as well. It really depends on what they believe it to be. So the Knights Templar, also known as the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, were an order of Christian knights, Catholic Christian, that was formed in approximately 1119 AD, following the First Crusade. So if they're getting this word, and it does mean those things that Stephen Knight said, they should not be worshipping them, should they? Because that's not their God. So how do they kind of rectify that amongst themselves? Now, could it be that they actually know at the very top of all of these faiths that they're worshipping the same being? The stated responsibility of the Knights Templar was to protect Christian pilgrims who were travelling to Jerusalem. The Knights Templar were given the Temple Mount in Jerusalem as their headquarters. This is why they want to rebuild the temple. And again, this folds into these Chabad guys wanting to build the temple. You would have thought they would have nothing to do with each other, but they do. They all follow the same Kabbalah, because at the very top, all of this stuff means the same thing. They just give different brands and flavours to different factions to help get this thing done. And it's by the looks of it, a few thousand people that really understand that they're all worshipping and working towards the same agenda. And I would suggest that the Freemasons, the average Freemason, is being used to build the temple, which is this new world order, and they won't get to live in it. And that's what I would suggest they're being hoodwinked into. Hoodwink again. The Knights Templar were given the Temple Mount in Jerusalem as their headquarters, and there are many legends of the Templars excavating the many tunnels beneath the temple in search of biblical treasures and artifacts. That's where they found the name, and that's where this Royal Arch level reenact this out, as we see before. Primarily due to financial dispute with King Philip VI of France, the Knights Templar were ordered to be disbanded by Pope Clement V, so he didn't have to pay his money, basically, to them. Many of the Knights Templars were arrested, tortured, until they confessed to unimaginable crimes, one of which was we worship Baphomet, but whether that was actually true or not, again, only they will know. And then burned at the stake as heretics, which is where we get Friday the 13th from. Some of the Knights Templar escaped the persecution and went into hiding. There are various traditions as to what happened to the surviving Knights Templar, with the most likely legend being that they eventually formed what is known as the Freemasons, which I think is probably right, but it's only a faction within the Freemasons, so they all think they're worshipping different gods, but they're not quite sure. The confusion within Freemasonry must be absolutely horrific, because they won't understand what's going on. So you've got a Christian sect within Freemasonry that possibly shouldn't be in there because they're not worshipping the Christian gods. The Knights Templar, full name, the United Religious, Military and Masonic Order of the Knights Templar and of St. John of Jerusalem, that's a mouthful, Palestine, Rhodes and Malta, is a fraternal order affiliated with Freemasonry. So affiliated, so it's separate, but it's affiliated. Unlike the initial degrees conferred in a regular Masonic lodge, which is most regular Masonic jurisdictions, so all your mates that go to them things, they go to these normal lodges, only require a belief in a supreme being, regardless of religious affiliation. The Knights Templar is one of several additional Masonic orders in which membership is open only to Freemasons who profess a belief in Christianity. So these are the Christian Freemasons, but would that not marry in with the other Freemasons that are worshipping all sorts of different gods? Wouldn't that be idolatry? It's again, it doesn't really work together unless they're all being tricked into worshipping a satanic god without their knowledge, and it doesn't really matter. One of the obligations entrants to the order are required to declare is to protect and defend the Christian faith. The word unified in its full title indicates that more than one historical tradition and more than one actual order are jointly controlled within the system. The individual orders united within this system are principally the Knights of the Temple, who are the Knights Templar, the Knights of Malta, the Knights of St. Paul, and only within the York Rite, the Knights of the Red Cross, which is the Sun Cross, which they have on their shield anyway. So I believe that this all just works into each other, and whether you're Christian, Catholic, Muslim, doesn't really matter in the end to these guys, because it's a means to an end, and that's how they hoodwink you in. In addition to the personal name of God, which is Yahweh or YHWH, pronounced with the vocalizations of Yahweh or Jehovah. Well, it's not Jehovah, because that doesn't seem to work in the fact when you trace these names back. So it'd be Yahweh. Titles of God used by Christians include the Hebrew titles Elohim, El Shaddai, and Adonai, as well as Ancients of Days, which we've seen is a Freemasonic end-of-the-world Kabbalistic thing, if ever there was one. Father Abba, thank you for the music, which is Hebrew for Most High. So this is the Christian God. And it has different names, but it certainly doesn't have the name Yahabalon, does it? This is just a bit more about the Freemasonry. The theme of the temple is fundamental to Freemasonry. That's why I wanted to show you that this whole Temple Mount thing, if it's going into the Jesuits, which are Catholic Church, basically Secret Service, which we know work with the likes of Donald Trump. He was Jesuit educated, so was Fauci, so was Bill Gates' wife. This is why this whole temple thing keeps popping up, because they're, whether they know it or not, most won't, by the looks of it, they're working towards the same ends. So who is controlling these people and making them, or getting them, to build this structure that they'll never get to use? They're building their own prison. The theme of the temple is fundamental to Freemasonry, whose aim is often described as building the temple of humanity. But which temple are we talking about? The symbol of this edifice is, of course, the Temple of Solomon. They call it a symbol, whereas obviously the bad guys actually want to build it, and I would suggest the Knights Templar want to build it as well, which are the Christian fact of the top level of Freemasons, but the interpretations that can be given to it are much broader. But the temple is not just a symbolic representation of the purpose of Freemasonry. This term is also used in Freemasonry in a much more concrete sense and often designates the premises where Freemasons meet to work, or even the building where the actual ritual premises are located. So we know that the front of all of their lodges have the two towers at the front, Jachin and Boaz. So they are looking to build this temple. Some of them believe it's just an allegory or it's a spiritual principle, but we're quite clearly looking at clearing the area of the Alaska Mosque and building this temple. And the Knights Templar, who are the Christian sect of the Freemasons, and the other Freemasons that are getting used to do this, are definitely in line with the Chabad guys, whether they know it or not, to build this temple and build this New Eden, which looks like, as Christopher John Bjerknes will tell you in the interview coming up, looks like it's going to be situated in Greenland. That's why Donald Trump's so interested in that. This is what's happening. Jacob and Esau. So if you put the Freemasons, the average Freemason, who doesn't really understand what this is all about, in to the role of Esau, they are toiling the land, like us. We're out there doing all the work, making everything happen. These are the high levels of business. That's why they have all these business contracts passed between them. They're toiling the land because they're the chaos. They were the firstborn. They were Esau in Kabbalistic terms. It's Jacob who will trick Esau out of his right, everything he's worked for, because he's hungry and tired. Like none of us, we're not allowed to earn millions. We're all kept to a level. We're the workers, the worker bees. Jacob, which you could say is these top level Sabbatean occultists that are also using the Israeli people, by the way, will steal the birthright of Esau because he's hungry and he needs to stay alive right at the very end. And that's what's happening. The Freemasons as well at the lower levels are getting used to build their own dystopian future. And I hope they wake up, because the God they probably think they're worshipping is not the God they're actually worshipping. And Israel, these top level Sabbatean Israelis, don't like Yahweh. They hate Yahweh. At the very end, they want to subdue Yahweh with Shekinah in the temple. So he's, had a bit of sex, and he's half asleep, and it's the Antichrist that comes in and takes over the temple. This is the long-term game. Everybody's being used. Everybody's been hoodwinked. So this is the C of E raises concerns, and serious concerns, about Christian Freemasons. The Church of England warned that secret society may not be compatible with Christianity, echoes concerns from 1987. The Church of England has reiterated significant concerns about Christians becoming Freemasons amid renewed controversy about the presence of the secretive organisation at the heart of the British establishment. Christopher Coxworth, great name, the Bishop of Coventry, flagged up a 1987 report issued by the church that highlighted a number of very fundamental reasons to question the compatibility of Freemasonry and Christianity. They're not worshipping the same guy, unless the end twist is they actually are. They just don't know it. The bishop was responding to a question tabled at the church's General Synod meeting this week in London, which sought information on services celebrating last year's 300th anniversary of the United Grand Lodge of England. United again. Remember, have a look at that, what that meant, all these different things under one roof, held in a number of Anglican cathedrals. The Anglican Synod has never come to a conclusion on the compatibility of Freemasonry and Christianity. The 1987 report raised what it termed serious questions, and the Synod recommended that they be discussed throughout the church. As far as we are aware, those discussions have never taken place. So people were concerned that basically the rituals that these guys were doing in Freemasonry could be deemed satanic. But could the real twist at the end be that actually they're all worshipping the same God anyway, they just don't know it? I just have a hunch that is probably right at the very top. And do realise what I'm saying is not that I believe that they are and that the people are actually doing that. It's what these guys believe. So when you enter these systems, you're entering their checkerboard, chessboard, whatever. You're going into their world, playing by their rules. For me and you, and if you're Christian watching this, doesn't mean you are, because you're not part of that system. But these guys are the ones building their prison, Solomon's Temple, for the future of all these business contracts. It's really interesting. The service came after Freemasons in Kent, Sussex and Surrey raised $300,000 for the restoration of Canterbury Cathedral's northwest transept. So this was really interesting. We shall be joined by several of the high rulers in the craft and the Holy Royal Arch chapter, together with brethren from the provinces of East Kent, West Kent, Surrey and Sussex, said a notice on West Kent Masons' website. The service came after Freemasons in Kent, Sussex and Surrey raised $300,000 for the restoration of the Canterbury Cathedral's northwest transept. There you go, money talks. So let's just forget about the fact that our beliefs don't gel. You got any money? And this is what it's about. So here's an image of the Knights Templar apparently worshipping Baphomet. Now, whether this is actually real or not, and it does Baphomet symbolize Satan, Baal, Moloch, it's hard to tell unless you're at the very top and know that these people actually worship this guy. But I think there's actually absolutely a element of truth to the fact that they're not worshipping who they're saying they're worshipping. So above as below, that would fit right in with the Kabbalistic understandings and the beliefs of Chabad Lubavitch. You could draw the so above as below two triangles around them, which is obviously the on the flag of Israel. It all does connect. These are Kabbalists and they are using Freemasonry, I believe, and maybe it wasn't set up to do that in the first place, but they've infiltrated, and their beliefs and their aims seem to align very much with the Chabad guys of this end times Kabbalistic prophecy. English Masonry retracts. In 1989, it was announced that Jarbulon would soon be dropped from England's Royal Arch ritual, so eventually they dropped it. Grand Scribe Ezra Hayam denied this was in response to recent Christian condemnations. I think that people just started to twig that these weren't working. Journalists later visiting Freemasons Hall overheard chortles that Junking Jabulon had invalidated the book Inside the Brotherhood, which was the Stephen Knight book, even before it was published. So could have they gotten rid of this before that book was published to just disregard what that book was saying about this being Yahweh, Baal and On? I would say there's a good chance that was the case. However, on March the 4th, Clifford Longley, the Times religious affairs correspondent, wrote that by replacing Jabulon with Yahweh, J-H-V-H, Yahweh. So remember, look, this is different. And I've only just noticed this myself. That's not Yahweh. That's Jehovah. They haven't got rid of it with Yahweh. They've got rid of it with Jehovah. But it was never pronounced Jehovah. It was always pronounced Yahweh. They can't pronounce it that way. So Yahweh and Jehovah are not the same being. Do you see what they do here? So JHVH is not the same as JHWH. Jehovah and Yahweh are not the same being. Very interesting. So, however, on March the 4th, Clifford Longley, the Times religious affairs correspondent, wrote that by replacing Jabulon with Jehovah, meaning Yahweh, which it doesn't, the Jews' holy name for God, which is Yahweh, not Jehovah, Masonry may be falling in deeper waters than the Grand Lodge has yet realised, while to invoke a false god is idolatry, which would be Jabulon. To invoke the name of the true God falsely is blasphemy. So you can see how this gets all convoluted, but what if they're all just different names for the same thing anyway? And then you're making it up as you go along, so, you can make any old shit up. Now non-Masons assumed that Jabulon was no longer in the ritual. Masons could at least utter this sacred and mysterious name, 3 of them, of God without having their heads cut off. Yet when England's fraternal front man was challenged to say it on radio, he refused, saying, because I've promised not to. So it still holds some sway. Very, very interesting stuff. They seem to be confusing each other completely. The Knights Templar absolved. So this was 700 years late after they were murdered by the Vatican, Friday the 13th. This was from 2007 October. The Vatican has published a secret document about the trial of the Knights Templar, including a long-neglected parchment showing that Pope Clement V initially absolved the medieval order of heresy, and they worked together. So it was basically the Knights Templar either got too big for their boots and were taken out, and it was something to do with that king before because he owed them some money. The 300-page volume entitled Processus contra Templarius, Latin for trial against the Templars, recently came out in a limited edition, 799 copies. There'll be a alchemical, Kabbalistic, gematria reason for that. Each priced at 8,377. Not so much then. Grab yourself one. Said Scrinium Publishing House, which prints documents for the Vatican Secret Services. So the stuff you really need to read, you can't afford anyway. This is how they hold the information between them two. It's available, but it's nearly $8,500. The Vatican will hold a news conference about the publication on October the 25th. Remember, this was 2007. The Order of Knights, which ultimately disappeared because of the heresy scandal. It didn't, but there you go. Recently captivated the imagination of the readers of the bestseller The Da Vinci Code, which linked the Templars to the story of the Holy Grail. The Vatican work reproduces the entire documentation of the papal hearings convened after King Philip VI of France arrested and tortured the Templars and temple leaders in 1307 on charges of heresy and immorality, which is possibly where this whole they worship Baphomet comes from. He owed them some money, basically. It's so convoluted, and everybody looks at things in black and white, Kabbalistic, goodies and baddies. It's hard to get your head around, but I believe that these Knights Templar are using the lower Masons to build this new world order, this technocracy. The Garden of Eden, possibly in Greenland, as we'll speak about soon with Christopher John Bjerknes, and the temple that they dug under and found Jabalon, the god name, apparently, that now they've dropped. Possibly. It's really, really, really interesting because they are all connected to the Jesuits as well. So you have the Jesuits, the Knights Templar, the Freemasons. They're all pushing towards this same goal. And you can tell that they all work together. Wilbur Ross, who organised the finances to bail out Donald Trump for the Rothschilds, on behalf of the Rothschilds, grew up in New Jersey and attended a Jesuit prep school in New York before earning degrees from Yale and Harvard Business School, where they all go. He spent 2 decades at Rothschild working on bankruptcies before starting his own private equity firm. He's the guy that bailed Donald Trump out. The reality, and then a lot of people don't know this, the reality that Donald Trump attended Fordham for 2 years is not something that is often talked about in the circles of Jesuit higher education. This fact is often comically dismissed, principally because Donald Trump did not graduate from Fordham. Doesn't matter. They don't go there to graduate. They go there to get brainwashed. So he went to a Jesuit college. And then you have Donald Trump here talking about and promising the golden age of Saturn. So you have the Freemasons, the upper levels, the Knights Templar, who love the temple because they're called after it. It was their headquarters. They want to rebuild it. You've got the Jesuits. You've got Donald Trump and his messianic Chabad Lubavitch lot trying to bring about the golden age of Saturn. They're all using us and the lower levels of the Freemasons for this purpose. Like Jacob used Esau to build and do the work and then come in and steal it at the end. And this is what we're talking about. The golden age of Saturn has been built in Silicon Valley and by all of these young, impressionable, geeky kids who are building this technology think they're going to have a part in this, and they're not. And it's really sad to see. I hope that made sense. I think it did. It's a really convoluted thing to try and unpick and show you, but hopefully we're getting somewhere now with all of this Freemasonic stuff. I was trying to stay away from Solomon's Temple this week, but it just all leads back to the same thing anyway. But yes, they're using everyone, and don't allow yourself to be hoodwinked into this madness. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that and understood how they're using each and every one of us against each other to build this new world order for them that they're going to come and steal at the very end. There's only a few thousand of these lunatics. 600,000 are supposed to go into the temple of these souls of the Israelites. And we won't be joining them, but they want us to build it for them. And let's not do that. Let's not contribute to our own demise. I've got a fantastic interview with someone that you've been asking to come back for a long time, Christopher John Bjerknes. He's with me now, and we're going to be speaking about Trump and why he's so interested in purchasing Greenland. Remember to do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and I'll see you in a week's time. Take care. Goodbye. Hi guys, welcome to this week's Classified here on Ickonic.com. I've got someone back today that you guys have been asking for some time. He's someone that I think very highly of and his work, and as you know, I quote it a lot and I promote it a lot because it's very, very important and very few people out there are speaking about these things. I've spent the last 14 months in Chabad land, messing around with the Messianic cult because this stuff is incredibly important. So today we're going to speak about why is Donald Trump so interested in Greenland? It seems such an absurd thing for him to want to grab hold of, but there is a very, very good reason why this Chabadnik is involved. Christopher, welcome back to the platform.
Oh, it's great to be back. Thank you so much for having me on. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you. It's like an old friend. Really looking forward to this. So why is Donald Trump so interested in Greenland?
This has deep Freemasonic, Kabbalistic, and banker fingerprints all over it that I can trace back to the Zohar, to the Talmud, to the Midrash, to the Bible itself. And within the United States itself, it all goes back to a man named Robert J. Walker, who was a prominent he wasn't a Freemason, but he worked with the bankers, especially during the Civil War. He got big loans out of Europe for the Union, and he was very closely associated with the Freemason President Andrew Johnson. And they wanted to take Greenland, Canada, Mexico. They bought Alaska. They also wanted to take Mexico. And this relates to this concept that in the 90s became the North American Union and the North American Free Trade Agreement. And it was always the idea of setting up the Leviathan as the North American continent plus Greenland. And also Greenland rings a bell in a Kabbalist's ears. It represents the Garden of Eden. And in the Zohar and many other places, especially the Bahir, which was a precursor to Kabbalah, Sefer HaBehir, it talks about the idea that the North Pole, the north of the Garden of Eden, is the Garden of Eden and is where the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was planted by Samael, the devil. And they believe that in the world to come, in the Messianic era, the fruit of the tree of knowledge and good and evil will have become ripened, and that the tree of life and the tree of knowledge will exchange places. The Bahir is very explicit that they are one tree that sprouts in two different places. The tree of knowledge sprouts in the north of the Garden of Eden, which is the North Pole, and the tree of life sprouts in the east of the Garden of Eden. And they want to enter this messianic era in the North Pole. They believe it has a portal into what they conceive of as a hollow earth. They believe there's another portal in the cave of the patriarchs in Jerusalem in Israel. And they believe that these are connected. And they also believe that the North Pole represents the Sephirah Din, which is also called Gevurah, on the left-hand column in the Pillar of Severity on the tree of life. So it is a place of punishment, din, and power, gevura. And that's why the Bolsheviks set up Siberia as a place of punishment for people to express their power and to punish the bourgeoisie and to send the best of society into the hell of Gevura for punishment. And I believe they want the Arctic regions to serve those various purposes as we head towards the messianic apocalyptic wars of Gog and Magog between the Leviathan of the North American continent plus Great Britain versus the behemoth of the Eurasianists, the Muslims and the Marxists of Russia and China and North Korea. And they are arranging to form all of these into blocks. And they want to incorporate continental Europe into the behemoth powers and use that so that we mutually consume and destroy one another. So what Donald Trump is setting up is a North American Siberia to span across from Alaska to Greenland. They are setting it up so that people of European descent can only get certain types of jobs, and they've been doing this for many years. And they set up the H-1B visa program so that people from India could come in and get the best jobs, and especially in the high-tech industry. So I suspect they're going to only offer up jobs to people of European descent from America, Canada, Australia, Great Britain, and continental Europe up in this new American Siberia, and make it very difficult for them to get jobs anywhere else. And they'll initially set this up as an enticement. There'll be high-paying jobs. They'll try to set up all kinds of infrastructure up there. They have something called Project Iceworm and Camp Century, I think in the 1950s, where they constructed tunnels underneath Greenland in the ice, set up a nuclear reactor, and they were going to set it up as a base for nuclear weapons. So this has been going on for a very long time. The Arctic was always explored by Freemasons, and I have lots of slides to cover who those Freemasons were. There was a man named Kent from England who started out, I think, in the 1840s. And then all the people who explored Great Britain and Greenland in the 19th century through the 20th century were huge, big Freemasons. And they discovered the North Pole, they explored the Arctic. And the Arctic is in the 33rd meridian of the degrees of longitude, which is very interesting and has a Freemasonic connection. And this went on all the way through President Harry Truman, who was also, like President Andrew Johnson, a big-time Freemason. And he also wanted to purchase Greenland. So this whole idea of forming a block out of North America, they took Texas, they took Alaska, and they wanted to take Canada, Mexico, and Greenland, goes all the way back to this guy, Robert J. Walker, and then in the administration of President Andrew Johnson, they bought Alaska, and they wanted to move, as I said, on Canada, Mexico, and Greenland. So they want to set up their Garden of Eden there. They need people to build that Garden of Eden. I suspect they want people of European descent to build that Garden of Eden up there. I suspect they also eventually want to set up gulags there, just as the Bolsheviks did in Siberia. And this will become a region of hell for punishment for the Leviathan Edomites of the West. And then after that is completed, they are trying to geoengineer climate change on the Earth that will melt the polar ice caps and reveal this Garden of Eden, and they ultimately want to build it underground.
It's incredible to see how many things fit into that, Christopher, in terms of what they've been talking about for a long time, and the things that you said talked about, the Leviathan versus the Behemoth, looking at Tommy Robinson, the likes of the guys doing over here in the UK, fostering up clear war between the Muslims and the British. It's clear as day, Musk jumping on that bandwagon. It's coming at us from everywhere. I don't want to ask too many questions and get into involved because you've got so much information that I want you to get across in this. But so they're looking to turn this, what like Esau and Jacob did, Jacob using Esau to toil the land, into their Garden of Eden, using people like myself to toil the land for them.
Absolutely, yes. And both as a process of punishment, just as they had people building the Trans-Siberian Railroad in the Soviet Union, they do it for punishment to create the infrastructure and also to torture Esau, because Esau is the scapegoat. The more that Esau suffers, they believe the more that their sins are cleansed. And that's why Jesus had to suffer so badly, so that the sins of Messiah, son of David, and the sins of King David would be cleansed, and they could enter into a messianic era of peace, at peace with their gods, believing that they had received redemption because all of their sins had been passed from Jacob onto Esau.
So now we're seeing that. Just a quick question. As someone like Musk who's involved in this, obviously he's pushing this kind of, he's made a mistake with the I can never remember what it's called, but the
H-1B visas.
H-1B visas, and they all turned against him. Then he sort of went, "Oh, quickly, I better talk about Pakistani grooming gangs in the UK from 8 years ago when he never cared about it anyway," to try and get his guys, try and get his fan base back. He he would be to me someone who's being very much used by someone like Trump, but then Trump's obviously being used by people way above his level as well. But they're all involved with these Habadnik guys, this messianic agenda. Um, how would the technology AI side play into the new Garden of Eden?
In terms of the H-1B visa program, it plays in terms of they're trying to get Indian Hindus involved in developing this technology. And they view Hindus as idolaters who worship animal gods, much like the ancient Egyptians did. And they think that the Hindus, therefore, represent on the spectrum the world of primordial chaos and the world of Satan, and are very far departed from the world of God. The God of Israel represents the Holy One. It represents goodness and evil and perfection, all in one undivided being. And as you descend down what the Neoplatonists call the great chain of being, you get further and further divided away from God. You get more distant, you get more imperfect, and you head down towards Satan. And the Kabbalists, together with the Neoplatonists and the Gnostics, believe that consuming animals and human beings bear the spark of this Holy One, this God at the top of the pyramid, and that these sparks descend down through the world's soul, which is called the Guf in Kabbalah, into human beings. And the human being soul is more ordered and more holy and divine than the animal soul. But the animal soul is more holy and divine and ordered than the plant soul. And the plant soul derives ultimately from the minerals and the light that the plant consumes. And then beneath the minerals, you have pure matter, which is the realm of chaos and Satan. So there's an elevation of matter into minerals. It then becomes more ordered and more divine and receives a holy soul in the form of the soul of plants. And then when animals consume those plants and minerals, they elevate that soul even more. And human beings do the same to animal and plant souls and the minerals that human beings consume. So in order for a human being to obtain the divine sparks it needs to elevate itself back to God into a divine ecstatic reunion with God in the Mystica Unia, they have to consume animals to elevate those animal souls into their soul, and then their own soul becomes elevated. But Hindus don't do that. So part of this agenda has always been to push veganism and vegetarianism, especially on the Leviathan of the West. And we can see that they are destroying animal products as a food source. It's very difficult to get eggs now in the United States. They are discouraging people from consuming milk in the UK by feeding the cattle additives, which supposedly reduce their methane output. They have been destroying cattle with mad cow disease outbreak. They destroyed a lot of cattle and sheep. They're destroying all the animal food sources. They are creating artificial animal food sources. And they believe that all of this deprives Europeans of their soul and drives them down towards Satan because they are no longer obtaining those holy sparks of animal souls. And eventually they're going to even get rid of plant foods and simply feed us manufactured minerals, which they believe reduces us to the level of Satan. So they want Hindus to be very much involved in all of this. They're making the West very welcoming to Hindus by getting rid of animal food sources and stigmatizing them as if they were a source of climate change, which instead being geoengineered. They are kicking Europeans out of these jobs to develop this technology, and this technology is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence relates to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They want all of our knowledge to come from this singularity of the new tree of knowledge and good and evil, which will be artificial intelligence. And it's natural for them to get the people that they conceive of as being the most satanic. And this is certainly not my beliefs. These are their beliefs. And they view that today as the Hindus as being the strongest idolaters, as not consuming the meat that elevates their souls, as worshiping Satan in the form of serpents and the sacred cow, which to the Kabbalists represents the golden calf. So they are setting up this H-1B visa program so that these people whom they believe are closest to Satan and therefore closest to the unripened tree of knowledge of good and evil to generate all of this AI technology. Now, this AI technology is meant to be the intellect, not only of human beings who have descended down the great chain of being towards Satan, but also computers, cell phones, computer monitors, smart devices, everything that will have this artificial intelligence, they conceive of as being demonic. They consider that all these machines become vessels for the demonic souls. They believe demons are surrounding us. In the Talmud, it says that on our left side, if we had eyes to see, we would see 1,000 demons. And on our right side, we would see 10,000 demons. So they conceive of these demons as pure souls at this point. They want to give these souls vessels, and they want to give these souls intellect. So the vessels that will serve as the body of these souls will be our computers, cell phones, the singularity, robotics, drones, etc. And a man named Rudolf Steiner in the teens and 20s of the 20th century forecast all of this. He forecast a great network of spiders spanning the earth. And he said that all machines, since they are produced out of matter, do not have the holy spark of the divine one, but instead are derived from the matter of chaos, the tohu vavohu hoshech, and therefore are satanic and will have satanic souls. So they want to bring these souls into these robots and create a living hell on the earth for everyone. We are surrounded by these robots who will command us, and we have drones above us constantly watching us. And you must be very keenly aware of it in England. This surveillance state relates to all of this because the roles of Satan are to be the witness of sin, to be the tempter of sin, to be the accuser of sin, the prosecutor of sin, and the punisher of sin. So they have set up a police state that functions to serve all those roles of Satan. It's a completely satanic system. And I should mention that the Freemasons are also Satanists. Max Heindel, in his book Freemasonry and Catholicism, revealed the fact that the Freemasons consider themselves children of Cain, and the craftsmen like Tubal Cain of metals. and that their souls derive directly from Satan because they have this serpent seed line mythology of Kabbalah, that in the Garden of Eden, Samael, the devil, the snake in the tree of knowledge of good and evil, fornicated with Eve to produce the child Cain. And that child Cain's soul passed along to Esau. And from there on, they believe to all the Freemasons. And they view that as divine and good and consider themselves that craftsman, that demiurge of this temple in which the priest class, the Kabbalists, will then reign. So they see themselves as being this divine intellectual force that is serving in a dual role together with the priest class of the Kabbalists to create this world to come. And that's why they refer to themselves as Masons, as crafting this new temple. And I think the Freemasons have always been involved in this idea that the North Pole is a portal, that there's a black sun in the center of the earth, and that after the 6,000 years, 6 days of creation, they will enter into this portal and create this new world to come as the new Garden of Eden within the earth. And they are the Masons of that construction, which is why they were always involved, the primary agents, the sole agents involved in the exploration of the Arctic. And now it'll be the colonization of the Arctic. And we have people geoengineering the world so that it will be much easier to get up into the Arctic. And Vladimir Putin has constructed ships that have nuclear power plants on them and is after the vast mineral resources and gas and oil resources in the Arctic. And Obama completely went along with that. And from 2014 onwards, since the Obama administration, they have all been working together. So even though on the surface it appears that Leviathan and Behemoth are at war, they are also collaborating constantly, working together to undermine the interests of the continental Europeans and the Leviathan powers of North America and the United Kingdom.
That's what's so fascinating, what you've just said about that, because this is the twisting of it, like the grapevine, the twisting of all of these. People want to see it in black and white terms, forgive the pun, goodies and baddies, and and the fact is that when you're talking, like you're saying, the Freemasons are building this temple, building this situation. They see themselves, but they see themselves as the lineage of Cain. Whereas then you look at the Kabbalists, who say the lineage of Cain are evil, but they're working together. So that kind of gets people confused as to how it all works, because it's very convoluted, isn't it?
It is, and it has to be in order to undermine the best interests of the people who are being subverted. If they were overt about what they were doing, they couldn't instigate these wars and these catastrophes and create the artificial need to do all of these things that they want to do and to obtain the labor and the intellect and the brains to get it done. They have always viewed the Europeans as being the Edomites, and therefore having the soul of Cain and having the soul that derives, having the intellect that creates all of this knowledge. And they view themselves as an intermediary between this Leviathan of science and technology that gets developed in the West and the behemoth of the East, which they view as spiritual. They view the Christians as being allied with Samael and the serpent and the tree of knowledge and good and evil, viewing everything as material and not spiritual, as intellectual and not faith-based or religious. And we had the Freemasons always pushing this idea. And we had this idea very strongly in the Renaissance, that we required science and logic and not faith, and we require experiment and not dogma in order to arrive at scientific truths that are testable and falsifiable. And this went on all the way from Bacon to Popper, this idea that we need experimentation and to derive truth not from dogmatic and necessarily more inductive than deductive reasoning. We have to look at phenomena and derive ultimate principles, which then deduce that phenomena, but we have to look inductively from the phenomena. All of this comes from this idea that it is the Europeans who are intellectual in this way, but the Muslims, they have perceived as not being that way, but instead being spiritual and taking everything on faith. So what they do is they subvert the West and get them into this idea that they are at war with the East and they need to develop these technologies and acquire these territories. Trump is trying to justify the acquisition of Canada and Greenland as a means of military defense against the Chinese, but at the same time, he's selling us out to the Russians. But that's just the pretext to do all of this. The ultimate goal is to take over the Arctic, to geoengineer the Earth so that there is a shift in climate and the Arctic becomes habitable. And but in that interim period, to place the European peoples into that climate to destroy them, just as was done in Siberia. And if that doesn't work out, then to instigate a nuclear war between East and West. And we see this battle of them serving as the intermediary in espionage to take the knowledge of the West and transfer it to the East. We had in the 40s the Manhattan Project, which was run by them with the support of the United States to develop the atomic bomb. And then Teller came up with the thermonuclear weapons. And then their spies, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg and David Greenglass, and dozens of others, many of whom were communists, then served as this intermediary to transfer that technology developed into the West to the East, to their allies in the Soviet Union, the spiritual people. And you'll hear Alexander Dugin and Vladimir Putin talking about the West as being this materialistic, technological body, and the East of the Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans being this holy spiritual body engaged in this spiritual war. But they can't keep up with the West, so they are assisted in this transfer by the espionage, which is being allowed both through the H-1B visa program, through Chinese espionage, which the United States government was aware of and did nothing about, and through the Israelis, who are constantly transferring this technology from the West to the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Pakistanis, etc. So to answer your question, it's all about creating this tension and creating artificially a need for all this technology and all this territory to be built to build these empires into these great forces of Leviathan and Behemoth that are set up to mutually destroy one another. And out of the nuclear weapons program, they created the mutually assured destruction system, whereby the United States and the Soviet Union could destroy not only themselves, but the majority of humanity.
And we spoke about that, and you spoke about that in many of your videos as well, in terms of that, in terms of the Leviathan and the Behemoth, and that was something I really, really resonated with me, really, well, it stuck with me. I don't like that term, but really stuck with me because it was quite clearly, and there was another character in there called Ziz, which I saw as the eagle that would come down and basically just feed off the flesh of the two dead. They've just mutually destroyed each other. But when we come back to this, I know you got some slides you want to go through, so should we start going through your slides? Because there is so much more to cover here. There's portals, there's Middle Earth, there's the seven layers of hell. It all folds into this, and obviously you're the person to explain it. So let's start going through what you want to get across, because as much as I could ask questions, I'm learning at the same time.
Okay, so this is from the Sefer HaBahir. The Sefer Yetzirah and the Sefer HaBahir were the precursors to Kabbalah that was then much more clearly expressed in the Zohar, and especially among Spanish and Catalonian Kabbalists in the 13th and 14th and 15th centuries. And in the Sefer Habahir. It's broken up into segments, and in segment 162, what is this attribute? It is the Satan. This teaches us that the Blessed Holy One has an attribute whose name is evil. Evil comes from the Holy One. Their monist system is actually dualist, and the Holy One can be broken up into its polarities of good and evil, male and female, light and dark, positive and negative, just like yin and yang is one circle, but it has two aspects to it. And they believe that evil also, evil does the greatest good. It does greater good than, and the Bahir says expressly that it does greater good than good itself, because someone who is intending to do good can do evil. But when someone who is evil intends to do evil and does good, that means that he is the perfection of goodness. It is to the north of the Blessed Holy One. Evil is in the north. And I'll show you Bible verses. Even in the Bible, it talks about this idea that associates the north with evil, which is why we have to watch out when Putin and Trump are both trying to take over the Arctic. Jeremiah 1:14, from the north will evil come forth upon all the inhabitants of the earth. Any evil, so the evil is going to come down from the north and it's going to destroy us. And it's this conquest of the Garden of Eden and of purgatory. Any evil that comes to all the inhabitants of the earth comes from the north. It has many messengers, and the name of them all is evil. Evil, some of them are great and some are small, but they all bring guilt to the world. So we are getting scapegoated for all the sins going all the way back to the biblical period, and the worship of the golden calf and the mixture of the Israelites into the Arab Rab, the mixed multitude that brought about this great sin of the worship of the golden calf. So we have to be wiped out in order to cleanse the world of this evil. This is because chaos is towards the north. Chaos, tohu, is nothing other than evil. So keep that constantly in mind. Their Garden of Eden is at the center of evil. Everything that they're doing is oriented towards making evil the greatest power and to turning the whole world into hell so that it can serve their god, Seth Typhon, in total darkness. And they want to block out the goodness of the sun, the god of the Egyptians, Ra. Chaos, tohu, is nothing other than evil. It confounds taha, the world, and causes people to sin. Every evil urge, yetzer hara. Hara means the evil. Ra, the god of the sun, is considered evil to them. And tohu, chaos, is what they want to replace Ra, so that Seth can slay Horus and slay Ra and make everything completely evil. That exists in man, comes from there. And why is it placed to the left? The left is also important because it references that Sephirah on the left-hand pillar of severity on the Sephirotic tree of life. In the middle, in Din, which is punishment, that is also called Gevurah, meaning strength or power. This is because it does not have any authority, any place in the world except in the north. Now, that left also relates to Elon Musk because he wants to colonize Mars. Mars is the planet of the Sephirah, Din, and Gevurah. So he wants to send us to hell, and that's symbolically done by sending us up into the Arctic, into the north. It is not accustomed to be anywhere except in the north. It does not want to be any place but in the north. If it remained the south until it learned the roots of the south, how could it lead others astray, etc.? So we see that this is a quest to drive us up into the north to be subsumed into this world of evil. These are the biblical verses that talk about how the north represents tohu, chaos, primordial chaos, tohu, vavohu, hoshech, formlessness, emptiness, and darkness. again, the world of Satan that they're trying to drive us down towards by encouraging Hindus to enter into our worlds. He stretches forth the north over Tohu and suspends the earth upon nothingness. In other words, chaos. But I will remove far from you the northern army and will drive them into a barren land. Again, the north in Joel is being equated with evil and armies and war. Ezekiel 1:4, I looked and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning surrounded by a brilliant light. The center of fire looked like glowing metal. Metal is related to Tubal Cain, the first one to work metals into armor and weapons. Jeremiah 14:15, the Lord said to me, from the north, disaster will be poured out on all who live in that land. Trump and Putin are pouring disaster onto Americans and Europeans and Russians by driving us into the north. And that's deliberate. I'm about to summon all the people of the northern kingdoms, declare the Lord. Their kings will come and set up their thrones in the entrance of the gates of Jerusalem. They will come against all her surrounding walls and against all the towns of Judah. That all plays into their mythologies of this messianic apocalyptic war that Chabad and the Kabbalists are trying to arrange. And Israel is to suffer terribly. As I've been warning them for 30 years, they should not go along with this because the prophecies call for 2/3 of them to be exterminated and only a small remnant to be left remaining. This book, Freemasonry, A Celebration of the Craft, talks about all the Freemasons who were involved in exploring and setting up the North Pole and the South Pole, which is also considered to be a portal. Richard E. Byrd was a Freemason, and he worked with Bernd Belchin to fly over both poles and plant Masonic flags at each of the poles. In 1666, Margaret Cavendish wrote a book called The Description of a New World, called The Blazing World, in which the character enters through this portal in the North Pole into another world. And in this book, she talks about Kabbalah frequently, and she was an ardent student of Kabbalah. So this is a centuries-old agenda to get us involved into the North and to explore for this portal that they're looking for into the underworld. Chabad.org has a good article that talks about how the North has this dual nature as purgatory, but also as the Garden of Eden, as the tree of knowledge, as in Vinland, which my ancestor Leif Erikson named Canada, and also the Garden of Eden, Greenland, which my ancestor Eric the Red named Greenland, as in Garden of Eden. This breach side means there's a gate, there's a portal up in the North Pole. This breach side is none other than the north side of the world, as the verse indicates, as I read from Job. He stretches forth the north over Tohu and suspends the earth upon nothingness. And this is from that article I just showed you. That is, the Blessed One placed the firmament over all directions, east, west, and south. As a dome is placed over walls, only the breached north side of the world is the firmament suspended over Tohu. The Freemasons pick up on this mythology. In the temple, Hiram constructed the molten sea. And the molten sea rests upon 12 bulls. And 3 of those bulls each represent one of the directions. The first one that is counted is the north, because the north is the portal. In order to clarify the nature of this breached north side of the world, we can pit one verse against another. One verse states, evil will emerge from the north upon all the inhabitants of the land. From here, it seems that the north represents purgatory, which is judgment. Another verse, however, how great is the good, i.e. the light that you have hidden away for those who fear you. Another verse, whose stomachs you fill, etc. The word hidden away of these 2 verses refers to the Garden of Eden. the Garden of Eden is hidden on the other side of this portal in the North Pole. For it is stated that the hidden good is stored away for the righteous. And another verse says, I will say to the north, give forth. That is, in the future, God will tell the north that which is meaning hidden away, the Garden of Eden, through that portal to yield all of its goodness to the righteous. Just as Jacob and Esau both emerged from Isaac, so also Garden of Eden and purgatory. Jacob is the Garden of Eden and purgatory is Esau, emerge from the north, the breach side of the world where there is a portal. Here is a Freemasonic and Satanistic description of this black sun that you go through the portal of the North Pole. This is why we have all these people pushing this flat Earth idea, because the flat Earth puts the North Pole in the middle of the Garden of Eden where the two trees are found. And they believe there is this black sun that is going to illuminate this underworld that they want to live in. And that gets into all kinds of geological ideas that when the Earth was created, it generated all kinds of heat. And in the magma and mantle of the Earth, there are radioactive substances, and the radioactive decay generates heat. So they have all the energy sources and potentially the luminous sources that they will need to create this underworld. And there's also this Agatha that shows these two portals, talking about Admiral Byrd, who was also a Freemason. And then there's supposedly a portal in Antarctica and a central sun to illuminate this Garden of Eden underneath the earth. In other words, the 7 layers of hell, just as there are 7 layers of planets and 7 spheres of heaven, there are 7 layers of hell below. This Freemasonry book also points out that President Andrew Johnson, who wanted to buy Greenland, who did buy Alaska, was a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Freemason, the worst of the Freemasons. Raphael Patai, in his book, The Hebrew Goddess, meaning Shekinah, the female aspect of God, talks about this text, treatise on the left-hand emanations, which talks about Lilith the Younger and Lilith the Elder. She is called Lilith the Elder. The Lilith, who is the female aspect of Satan, is called Sophoni, meaning the northerner. So northern is once again aligned with Satan. Out of the north, the evil one shall break forth. Both of them, Samael, meaning the male aspect of Satan, and Lilith, meaning the female aspect of Satan, were born in spiritual birth as androgynes corresponding to Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve came in the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is in the north. And the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is the Sephanit, the north. Samael and Lilith are referred to as the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, as is Shekinah. They are ultimately all one God and one tree. This talks about the fact that the Freemason, Robert Perry, first reached the North Pole in 1909. There was another Freemason, a black man, who went with him. I think his name was Alexander Heyman or something like that. And he was another one of the Freemasons. And he reached the North Pole. This is all dominated by Freemasons, who are the craftsmen of this world to come and the craftsmen of the Third Temple of Solomon. And it talks about Richard Byrd, who explored the two poles, who was also a Freemason. Robert E. Peary began his Arctic explorations in Greenland. And finally, in 1909, he reached the North Pole, and he was a member of the Kane Lodge. Kane is that Brit, that Englishman I talked about, who was also a prominent Freemason, who was the first one to start exploring the Arctic. This has always been a Freemasonic and Kabbalistic project. Gershom Scholem You already know that the tree of life and the tree of knowledge are one tree. It was the Bahir who first said that. Below, but two trees above. They have the same root structure and they exchange places in the world to come so that the surface of the earth becomes hell, where all the Gentiles live, and the inside of the earth becomes heaven, becomes the Garden of Eden. And the root structure is bound on that barrier, that surface, and they have to break through that surface and invert the world and convert the world that we live in on the surface into hell as they convert the underworld into their paradise, their Garden of Eden. The tree of knowledge is from the northern side, but the tree of life is from the eastern side, from whence light emanates into the entire world. The moon and the sun rise in the east, and the potency of Satan is there. And it is written in the Jerusalem Talmud. It's actually the Bahir. What is Satan? This teaches us that the Holy One, blessed be he, has a quality whose name is evil, and it lies in the north of God, lies in the Arctic. Out of the north, the evil shall break forth, et cetera, et cetera. So anyone who wants to pause this can go through and read all of this. This is from Gershom Scholem, the preeminent expert on Kabbalah, on the mystical shape of the Godhead. Harry Truman, as I said, was one of these Freemasons who wanted to buy Greenland. Trump wants to buy Greenland and the Panama Canal and annex Canada. This is a good article that people can look up. It's about this Robert J. Walker guy who was involved with the bankers. He was Secretary of the Treasury under Polk from 1845 to 1849. And then he worked with Freemason Andrew Johnson. So we have a union of the bankers and the Freemasons to take Mexico, Canada, Greenland, Texas. Well, they had Texas at that point, but they went on to purchase Alaska from the same power, Greenland, and probably Iceland also. Seward was working in Andrew Johnson's administration and commissioned Walker to set all this up. So this is absolutely nothing new. I think that's the end of my slides. And there we have it.
It's absolutely incredible, isn't it? I mean, that's a lot of information, obviously, people take in. What connection does the Jesus being like the Northern Star have to this, if any?
I have a lot on the Pole Star in an upcoming work. And once that's published, maybe you can have me back so that we can discuss that. It has a lot to do with it, and a lot to do with the Leviathan, as I'll get to.
So we talked about there. I just want to go on to the portal stuff. So with the Black Sun, there's elements connected to the land of Nod, which Cain was banished to. With the only kind of point of reference they had was the Black Sun. So this is kind of all of the same thing. So it's basically Eden within the earth that's really. Does this have anything to do with what they're doing in New Mexico in terms of actually just doing stuff underground that we can see all over New Mexico? Are they trialing out some technology there, seeing if this stuff works? Do you think? I know these are just questions and theories, to see what would actually work in the North Pole, because clearly even the Nazis had a massive fascination with the North Pole.
Oh, absolutely. They need, again, they need the West to develop all of these technologies, which will enable them. Kabbalah has many layers to it, and there is a practical as well as a mystical side to everything that they do. And they realize that there will be no divine intervention in any of this. So they view this essentially as a plan that they themselves set about to fulfill. And in order to fulfill those plans, they require the science and technology to ripen. So they foster the development of the West. They will provide economic stimulus to the West, not only to prepare us for war and to develop military technologies, but also to develop all of these technologies involved in cloning, involved in tunneling, involved in creating underworld living spaces, involved in geoengineering hell on the surface of the earth, and the possibility of converting, say, skin cells or other genetic materials from a male into an egg cell, so that the spermatozoa of a male can combine with that same male into an egg to create a new generation of immortal androgynes. And you mentioned the idea of Cain going into the land of Nod. In the Zohar, it talks about this land in which there are beings which have two heads. And these two heads are going to be one male and one female. And it is in an underworld. And so they are developing, especially in Israel now, these technologies to create androgynous beings out of one person. And that's one of the things that scares me most. And again, I want to give a heads up to the Israelis and their people around the world. They may very well want to exterminate every one of you in order to obtain ultimate redemption. And they're only going to leave their one messianic figure behind, the Messiah, son of David. And from his singular DNA, craft 600,000 immortal androgynes. And they are on the cusp of having the technology to do it, if not there already. And the reason that I suspect that this is their plan is because this was their mythology. When the Garden of Eden was created, supposedly Adam had all 600,000 souls of their people. And then those souls were catastrophically divided into Adam's male aspect, Adam, and Eve's female aspect, Eve, into these 600,000 people that ultimately left Egypt in the Exodus, the 600,000 males that left in the Exodus. So we have all of their people coming from this one singular man who was initially an androgyne, Adam. And then we had the fall that necessitated the cleansing of the earth to remove all the evil that was put into the world through the fall and through the introduction of knowledge through the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Once that cleansing took place, Samael once again planted the grapevine of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil into the garden. But it was Noah who got drunk off of that grapevine. And it was Noah, one single man and his wife, who spawned humanity, supposedly after that great cleansing of the earth. So I am very confident that their plan ultimately is to spawn the reunion of these 600,000 souls into 600,000 immortal androgynous beings, and to consume both the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, to develop that technology to do it once it's ripened, and also to consume the tree of life to make them all immortal as the gods are immortal. And at that point, they will abandon the Torah they already have, and they will replace it with the oral Torah, which is another subject we can delve into very deeply at some point down the road.
Absolutely. And this carries on, Christopher, with the information I was looking back maybe 6 or 7 months ago in terms of New Mexico and some of the things going on there. Obviously, scratching about literally about the surface, no pun intended. What was going on there? They had a lot of atomic weapons testing there from Columbia University, which has the blue teal, Shekinah kind of protection there on top of it, and we see all these buildings around the world, including the Statue of Liberty, which is Shekinah, I believe. There with, but in the, I believe now from what you're saying, it makes total sense. So you had Jeffrey Epstein's New Mexico ranch there. We spoke very much with Juliet Bryant in terms of this Lilith concept of them possibly trying to bring forth that. He wanted to seed a generation of people from his New Mexico ranch. You have Dulce base there. You have Trementina site there, which is the Church of Scientology, their spiritual technology part. It all seems to be going on. You had Los Alamos National Laboratory underneath Mexico. So, from what you're saying there, could it be that this was a test site and a way of spending decades underneath ground trying to get the technology right for what they're going to do, possibly in Greenland? It makes sense
I
to
don't
me.
even think it's controversial. It's absolutely a fact. As I said, they have this Project Iceworm in Camp Century, which mirrors that tunneling that you're describing. They started conducting nuclear tests underground. Um, yes, absolutely, all of that. And this again relates now on the 33rd degree of latitude, you have Israel and you have New Mexico and you have Sedona in Arizona, which is also considered a very significant part of all of this. And Los Angeles, between Los Angeles and San Diego, where we're starting to see all these fires. Los Angeles is, I think, the 34th degree of latitude, and I think San Diego is about the 37th, so it's right in that ballpark. So you might want to take a look at the degrees of longitude and latitude of those specific areas and how they correlate to Israel itself, and how they correlate to the 33rd meridian of the 33rd degree of longitude of the West, shooting right down through Greenland, right where all of these explorers began their explorations into the Arctic, and where the Vikings even started to create Greenland and then moved along onto Vinland in Canada.
It's fascinating that well, it's terrifying and fascinating that they've got this going on, and we're starting to put the pieces together of this thing that is quite clearly a project that's gone on for thousands of years. The other thing that Donald Trump, and we'll come back, circle back to Trump. His the tales of Baron Trump, and I know you've heard of this. There's stories that
Mhm.
came out, and he went into the underworld, and I believe he time traveled, and there was a dog involved, which would be Toto from Wizard of Oz. There's a lot going on there with the tales of Baron Trump, isn't there? Because it's just
It's
that's no
Ingersoll
coincidence.
Rand, right?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I did a video on that 2 years ago or a year and a half ago or so. It all correlates to Kabbalah. All the imagery is the imagery of Kabbalah. And that story also goes all the way back to that Margaret Cavendish and this Kabbalistic work. The year 1066, 666 was the year that Shabbatai Tzvi declared himself as the Messiah. It represents the year 5666, in which all of these events and the arrival of Messiah was supposed to commence. So, yes, this is all deeply connected, and it is not coincidental. It is, they have a consistent understanding of all these things, of this portal, of this journey into the underworld. You have Jesus taking a journey into hell. I mean, all of these stories are all related, and they are all to arrive at this idea that the surface of the earth is to become hell and the subterranean world is to become their paradise.
So above as
And
below.
Ra is to be defeated by Seth Typhon.
So that's what they mean by so above as below in one context. They're going to flip it. They're going to flip it over topsy-turvy day type. January the 6th was topsy-turvy day. It seems to be like because Alice in Wonderland had this kind of saying that she one of the famous parts of it was that I can't quote it. Um, I dream of a world that everything that is isn't and was wasn't. It's all upside down and topsy-turvy. That seems to be a massive part of the tree. You remember you talk about in your books, the tree of life being spun around and turned upside down basically at the end.
Yeah, that's a wonderful quote. And Alice in Wonderland and the sequel to it also relate to this idea of space time, this four-dimensional world and traveling through time and space in those kinds of ways. Yeah, that fits perfectly. And it's like an hourglass. You have
Mm.
initially the tree of life above the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The tree of life represents the Sephirotic tree. The roots is Melkut, which is Shekinah, the the earth itself. And then above in the Sephirotic tree, you have the seven planets and the seven spheres of heaven. And below that, the divine realm when you cross over the great abyss. But then below, Shekinah transforms into Lilith. And below that, you have the Kalapatic tree, which is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil with all its demonic spheres. And they want those like a great hourglass at this 6,000 year junction, which could happen right as we're speaking, to switch like an hourglass and to reverse everything, just as you described as topsy-turvy in Alice in Wonderland.
I don't want to keep you too long, Christopher. I could ask you questions all night. One thing I do want to ask you though is for people that are getting their head around this, what to look out for 2025.
Oh, there's a lot coming, and it's terrible. Um, I tried to warn people that Trump is not your savior, Putin is not your savior, Elon Musk is only allowing free speech as a trap so that he could dupe people into voting for Trump so that they can empower this technocracy to deceive people with treacherous influencers. And oh, that's a whole big subject. Maybe we should do a whole show on that. 2025. Look at how it kicked off with all the horrors taking place. They're traumatizing people, and they're hitting us again and again with these things that make us question reality itself. And the Dernme Kabbalists of the Young Turks referred to this process as kneading bread. They are kneading us like bread. They're twisting us. They're pounding us. They're stretching us. And eventually they're going to bake us. And that's part of what is going on right now. It's often referred to as gaslighting. But there's much more to that's only on the surface, again, to subvert our society so that we go along with these programs. They scare us. And they scare us so that we're looking for a leader to save us, and they scare us so that we're looking for solutions. And they are proposing these as our solutions, as taking over the Arctic, as setting up for a war with China, et cetera, as preparing for climate change, as blaming everything that's occurring, the forest fires, on climate change, saying that we can't eat animals anymore because of climate change. And it's all a process of screwing with our heads to get us to go along with it, which is so important for people to understand that they can't do this unless we go along with it. And if we had legitimate influencers and a legitimate means of accessing the public, we could reverse and stop all of this, which is why I and you and David Icke are so heavily censored, because we need to go beyond the political into the world of education and let people know that the things that they're proposing are not in our best interest. These people are out to destroy us, not to save us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's really important to have you on the show and have you being able to be heard by as many people as possible, which I will continue to do so. Your book, Beware of the World to Come, and your other books are fantastic. Where can people find your work and support? Also, please support Christopher in the work that he's doing as well.
You can find them at my website, cjbbooks.com. Both links to all of my books where you can purchase them, and also links where you can donate. I want to thank all the people who have donated to me. I very much need your support. I've been living on the margins for a very long time now, and I could go under at any moment. So I will be most appreciative for any support you can offer. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. We'll put all the links as well in the video, and Christopher will be back with us on Ickonic soon. And also, I believe we're going to be doing some more of our Kabbalah drama podcast in the near future to keep this information going, because this is the stuff you need to hear.
Thank you so much for having me on and giving me another opportunity to reach your audience. I'm tremendously grateful to you, and I very much look forward to discussing what's coming in 2025, especially as Trump takes office on the 20th. Things are going to get real interesting. At least won't be boring.
Well, it won't be. No, no, it won't be. No, fireworks are never boring. So, guys, remember to do your own research, and we will speak to you in a week's time here on Ickonic.com. Take care. Goodbye.